I think that when you had me on and we went for a long time and we just emptied our mental notebooks on each other. And
Right.
you asked me at the end of that show, who do I think the best player in this draft is going to be? Draft overall. And I could have said Joe Alt, or I could have said, I really like anybody who would have been taken early, Michael Penix, something. And there was some conviction in my body. Maybe I was just tired and dehydrated. I said I thought Ricky Pearsall is going to be the best player in this draft. There's something
you did, and people can go check that. That's on my YouTube page. This is our mock draft that Dieter and I did just a couple days before the draft. You were hot on Pearsall. Tell us why.
He catches everything. Polished route runner. Every reason you just sort of laid out. The other thing, too, is there's no stain in his game. I would say that the two things that you would ever have to worry about with Ricky Pearsall is physicality at the line of scrimmage within 5 yards, right? And I think there's a lot of receivers that you can say that with. If you get hands on him, you can knock him off his routes a little. He's not the strongest dude in the world. He's no A.J. Brown. And the other thing is when you get him on choice routes, he consistently takes the inside leverage to the inside of the field, and he rarely tries to push back, even if the hips are telling you or the feet are telling you, go deep, take the 9, go deep on the 7. He'll consistently take the inside, even when he has clear leverage against a secondary. The second one I can write off to a degree. We're going to have to see at the NFL level. I can write it off to a degree in that his quarterbacks at Florida sucked. So if he goes deep,
really
he's not getting the ball. He's not getting the. Why would I make my quarterback's life harder? He can't throw it there. So why am I running there? That's the benefit of the doubt I'm going to give him. On the physicality aspect of it, well, there's another guy who has that problem. His name is Deebo Samuel. And there will be some folks, I'm sure, in the comments section that will get upset with me saying this, but I want to be clear about the nuance of it. Deebo Samuel is one of the great football players I've ever seen with my own two eyes. Football player. Ricky Pearsall is a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel. He cannot do everything Deebo Samuel can do, but he is a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel, and I think that might be the case on day one of training camp. What he can do is, if you liked what Brandon Ayuk and Brock Purdy did this past season, and I think back to the Patrick Peterson play week 1 against the Steelers, where Brock ripped one into the front right corner of the end zone, where Patrick Peterson, for the only time all game, was in great coverage, great position. Couldn't have done anything more as a cornerback. One of the great all-time cornerbacks, definitely on his last legs. And Brandon Ayuk, he threw it right to Brandon Ayuk's hip, where only he could catch it. And that started a great relationship on the field between Ayuk and Purdy. They had a connection. There was an understanding. If you get an ounce of space, I'm getting you the ball, buddy. He's going to have that with Pearsall. And he might even have it at a higher level with Pearsall, because he's a weapon for you at all 3 levels. And I think if you put him in a Kyle Shanahan offense that schemes guys open better than anybody else and puts you in a position where you don't have to deal with that physicality at the line of scrimmage on a 5-yard in, especially with the rules these days, I just have a very hard time seeing how he is not going to be the 49ers version of, and it feels like a lazy comparison because they're both white guys, but he's their version of Cooper Kupp. And when you take that one step forward, I think this overall draft has told us that the 49ers, they're obviously building around Brock Purdy, and we can argue if they effectively did that in this draft or not. By not getting a future left tackle, there's an issue there, and we can get into that a little bit later. But they are clearly going to have a more Brock Purdy-style offense this upcoming season, and that might include being more like the Rams that we know with Sean McVay than the 49ers we knew with Jimmy Garoppolo as the quarterback, where everything had to be to the middle of the field. This is the first offseason they've had where Brock Purdy can throw a football. I think Kyle Shanahan and him are getting in the lab, and I think we're going to see a different 49ers offense than we've seen the last couple of years. And considering it was the most efficient and prolific offense in the NFL last year, that's a really exciting possibility, and Pearsall's a big part of it.
Yeah, and people, I'm not saying he's better than Cooper Kupp, but he's a better athlete than Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp ran in the 4.6s, and yet still had this quickness and ball skills and hands. And look, he still became one of the best receivers in football, even with his 4.6 40. This guy runs 4.41 and has a 42-inch vertical. And just because he's a Caucasian receiver, we're kind of like, like his athleticism is not real. 4.41 and 42. I mean, just
SEC cornerbacks thought the same thing, and look what happened to them.
I mean, and just cross compare those two things. Just go find me all the receivers in this draft that ran 4.41 and had a 42-inch vertical. I bet you it's nobody or maybe one or two guys.
Yeah.
I mean, those are really, really great athletic traits. So we all kind of slept on those athletic traits. And I was just thinking, of guys like, I'm looking at Xavier Legette going, man, that guy's A.J. Brown. And I
Agreed.
do think there's some A.J. Brown elements. I mean, Lewis Riddick immediately was like, A.J. Brown. He reminds me of A.J. Brown. So I'm not alone on that.
3 months ago, I put my neck out there, and when we were first evaluating wide receivers, and I go, I really like this Xavier Legette guy, and you're going to hate me for saying this, but I think he's A.J. Brown.
Yeah. I mean, big, strong, fast. So in a way, I do understand the people saying it's low end, because at the end of the day, do I think that Pearsall will evolve into their number one receiver? Well, it's kind of a weird thing. It's like, I can picture him catching 100 balls. I can picture him becoming this Cooper Kupp guy. And if that was the case, I guess you'd have to say that he absolutely could be a number one receiver. But there's something about his profile that says, he's going to be more of a complimentary guy. Like, I think he'd be better on a team that had Ayuk and Deebo, and you mixed him in, as opposed to you took away Ayuk and you took away Deebo and you said, Pearsall is your number one guy against the number. You're going up against, whatever team, you're getting the Chiefs, you're getting their number one corner. And I don't know if this guy can handle everybody's number one corner. The collegiate production could have been bigger than what it was, but I think a lot of that's explained away by the quarterback. I just think he's a really good player who's going to be really good right away. And I also love the fact that, in his visit and in his phone call words are cheap, but you get to know the players and what they say and the kinds of things that they say and don't say. And I just loved it when he said to Lynch and Shanahan, hey man, you're getting a good one. Because that's like that's like kind of saying like, you know what? I'm damn good and I'm going to prove it this July, as opposed to you drafted me and I'm fortunate. You know what? You got a good one. In other words, I'm going to fight like crazy and work like crazy to fulfill my potential, and I'm going to succeed. And I love that. I love hearing that from the players. I love that ownership of the,
100%.
of their experience. And I'm
listen,
looking forward to him.
He played like it too. This is, I talk a lot about a guy has to have the crazy. It's not the best term, but you understand what I'm talking about. It's not just loving ball and being a film junkie or anything like that. It's about being willing to sacrifice your life for the game and your teammates, and putting yourself out there in positions that are going to be not just uncomfortable, but painful in order to make the play for your team. His team sucked. He could have quit on that team so easily because he was clearly the only player that could move the ball down the field for the Florida Gators last year. I know they had some decent running backs. They didn't produce. They weren't good enough. And so this is a guy who, if he didn't have it between the ears, if he didn't have that sort of I love ball temperament, that sort of crazy that I'm looking for, he wouldn't be putting himself in positions, as he did countless times, to have his spleen be exploded by 4 helmets going into his back. The amount of catches that he made where he took hits that would fell a mortal man, take them down for the rest of the season, the rest of their life, end football careers. Think about the highlight catch that he made against Charlotte. The Charlotte 49ers suck. He was quadruple covered, and the ball is somehow still 10 feet over his head, and he goes up and backhand, one hand, Odell Beckham Jr. catches it, comes down to double contact. Every single time this dude took a massive hit, and it was effectively every time he caught the ball, he popped right back up, do it again the next time. I am in love with his temperament as a football player. Clearly, it extends off the field as well. I mean, he might not be a great quote. He might be a bit of a character. He seems like an interesting cat, but I watch him on the field, man, and he knows what he's doing out there. He got consistently better throughout his college career, and now he is going to an absolutely perfect scheme for what it is he can do. And I think that it is just going to be a beautiful marriage between receiver and offensive coordinator and quarterback. And by the way, from the Phoenix, Arizona area, Niners took 2 Phoenix, Arizona wide receivers, quarterbacks from Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, I don't know what's going on in the Valley of the Sun, but they're not going to lack for the ability to do some off-season work, because I imagine these guys are going to be around each other 365 days a year.
I'll push back even more because there were people that told me, "Hey, man, they let the Chiefs get up and get Xavier Worthy." I
Haven't.
love Xavier Worthy. Don't get me wrong, and I love watching anybody that fast, and he's got impact speed. But I'm concerned about the durability, and also when you're watching Xavier Worthy, he makes it's his tape is very revealing. He runs go patterns along the sideline.
Mhm.
The Niners with Brock Purdy don't throw the go pattern along the sideline route that often.
No.
You want guys who succeed in the middle of the field, who have ball skills and can run routes and feel the soft spot in the zone. I mean, I know Xavier Worthy is big and fast, but he ran that time at 164 pounds. So I kind of question the
that big.
durability. I think this guy, believe it or not, Pearsall,
Yeah.
is more perfectly suited to play with Brock Purdy than Worthy, who has huge speed. But is Purdy going to air it out down the sideline to Worthy? And then to me, the injury risk, and then you factor in Pearsall and what he can do in the middle of the field. I think Pearsall is the perfect weapon for Brock Purdy. I think it's going to show. I think it's going to show right away.
I think there's something to be said about Xavier Worthy. He works very well for what I think Kansas City needs. They already signed Hollywood Brown this offseason. They clearly just need someone to do what Tyreek Hill did. No one's going to be Tyreek Hill, but just take the top off the damn defense. Run the 9 route. Run that deep 7. Like just go and get the safety to pay attention to you so that Travis Kelce can do his work underneath, so Rashee Rice can do his work underneath. They had to play an entire season of football where the safeties just kept creeping down and creeping down and creeping down, and they still won the Super Bowl. Imagine what happens when they get that deep threat back, and they'll have 2 good options there. But Worthy didn't make any sense because I think he was the 3rd best receiver on Texas this past season. And that's not to say the 3rd best receiver on a great team like Texas isn't NFL draft worthy or first round worthy, but it's just to say he wasn't the go-to guy there. And I want to be able to see what you can do with high volume as opposed to these high athletic traits. If I'm going to put the faith of my franchise and my quarterback in your hands. And one step beyond that, you have to think about the need here. And the need for the 49ers isn't X receiver, the guy who's actually outside. The Niners run really tight splits. Do I prefer Pearsall in the slot, a traditional slot role? Absolutely, because I don't want him to have hands laid on him at the line of scrimmage. It's the one knock on his game. And if you put him in the slot, he gets a nice running start and he can make somebody miss with his open field elusiveness. But the 49ers run tight splits, and they oftentimes keep the Z as almost a flanker wide receiver. So effectively, your number 2 wide receiver, for a lot of other teams, he's outside by the numbers too. He's an outside receiver. The number 2 receiver for the 49ers is effectively a slot receiver. And that's what Deebo Samuel has been. And that's the guy they're trying to replace. They've been trying to trade him for weeks. I know that there's been a lot of buzz as of late. I was under the understanding about 6 weeks ago that he was going to be a Baltimore Raven and that there was a deal in place, and it fell apart. I don't know where. I don't know where. Maybe my info was bad in the first place, but they have been actively trying to trade Deebo. They're going into a lame duck season with Deebo because after this season, as we've talked about before, they're going to have to make some serious cuts as to make room for Brock Purdy under the salary cap. Deebo Samuel is an obvious replacement. They didn't restructure his contract in any way, so they're eating $28 million on the salary cap this upcoming season. If they believe Deebo Samuel was going to be with this team in the future, he would have been restructured. If they wouldn't be trying to trade him, and if they did try to trade him, they would have done it well before April 1. I just think that in the short term, he comes in. He's a really good option. He can play all 3 of the spots that you need a wide receiver to play for the 49ers. I think those 3 spots are going to be used more frequently than in the past when they were a 2 wide receiver team. I think they're going to spread it out more with Brock Purdy in this upcoming season and beyond. And I think he can replace Jennings in the slot. I think he can fill in for Deebo at Z. And I think he can play X with Brandon Ayuk if he misses any time. And then down the line, he's your Z. He's your number 1 go-to Z. And that's when the production really ramps up because Ayuk's going out. He's got one-on-one on the sideline. The safety's going to have to come and pay attention to him because heaven forbid he gets over the top on you. And Pearsall's going to go to work. Going to go to work on the middle of the field. Going to go to work on those quick out routes. Going to go to work. And if you need to move the ball, he's got 7 yards for you every single time, no matter what. The same way that they rode George Kittle for 2 straight years, they're going to ride Ricky Pearsall in the future. He's a perfect fit for the Kyle Shanahan passing offense which I think is going to be a lot more dynamic, a lot more interesting, and a lot more Rams-like moving forward, you need a guy like Ricky Pearsall to hold the fort because they didn't have anyone who could play Z wide receiver last year when Deebo Samuel went out.
Purdy to Pearsall is going to be maddening to defend for opposing defenses.
No
and
doubt.
that right there is going to open things up for the speed that they have. And they've added more speed today. And we'll talk about that